around the dinner table. I was about 35 before I realized that that's not normal. But I've gotten over it, and everything's okay. But it has left me with a lingering love for the Constitution and an intolerance for the idea of limitations placed on the federal government by the Constitution. Because Article 1, Section 8 lists 18 discrete clauses. Those powers are limited. They're limited to basic things that we know only the federal government can do. Things like the power to regulate interstate and foreign trade, the power to coin money, to establish a uniform system of weights and measures, to tax and to spend, to declare war, to grant letters of marque and reprisal, authorizing people to be pirates on behalf of the federal government. I want to get a letter of marque and reprisal someday. Before I die, I'm going to have an eye patch, the pirate's hook, and you can join me if you want to. We'll take a ship sort of like that one.
So the Department of Education.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a minute. Even a letter of marque and reprisal wouldn't make that one constitutional. We need to get rid of that one. So that would frame every debate that I have. Unfortunately, that hasn't been framing the debate. Even the debate that my opponent has been waging. You see, because he himself has sponsored his own health care legislation, which, like the President's health care proposal, declares health care to be a right protected by the federal government. A right. What's a right? Well, a right is something that the government can't do to you. Like the government can't tell me where to go to church. It can't tell me I can't have a gun. It can't subject me to an unreasonable search and seizure. So if you call health care a right, you're saying the federal government can't not provide me with health insurance. What? I don't find any place in my copy of the Constitution that gives them the power to do that. Number two, like the President's health care proposal, Senator Bennett's health care proposal contains an individual insurance coverage mandate. It tells each and every one of us we have to buy health insurance. Not just any health insurance, the type of health insurance that Congress, in its infinite wisdom, says is appropriate for us to have. And it says that if we don't do that, we'll be in big trouble under federal law. We'll be fined, we'll be subject to severe penalties. So he does that. Now, people have started asking him, thankfully, the important question, the question that hasn't been asked very much over the last 75 years. What gives Congress the power to do this? His answer? Very similar, almost identical in substance, to an answer provided by Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi when asked the same question. The Supreme Court, well, yeah, and before after she said, "Are you serious?"
Yeah, that's terrible.
"Are you serious?" And then she stormed off in a huff.
Yeah.
After that, she sent out a staff member in the grand tradition of Congress saying, what Speaker Pelosi actually meant by that was, how many times a week do you suppose they have to do that on the Pelosi staff, by the way? What Speaker Pelosi meant was that the Supreme Court has interpreted the Commerce Clause and the Spending Clause, Article 1, Section 8, Clauses 1 and 3 of the Constitution, broadly enough to give Congress the power to regulate basically anything that it thinks is important to regulate. Well, when somebody asked Senator Bennett the same question, he sent back a letter. And I've actually seen a copy of this letter saying, the Supreme Court has interpreted the Spending Clause and the Commerce Clause of the U.S. Constitution broadly enough to give Congress the power to regulate basically anything that it thinks is important to regulate. So you get the same answer coming from Nancy Pelosi as from Bob Bennett. Now, I want to make one thing very clear. Bob Bennett is a good man. And he's done some good things for our country and for our state. But I respectfully, albeit forcefully, disagree with his take on the Constitution. In my book, in my world, my oath will not be to that loose set of principles consisting of what the Supreme Court will allow me to get away with. My oath is to the text, as it was written, as it was understood by the founding generation, and as it can still be understood today by each and every one of us if we'll take the time to read it. That is the reason I'm running for the United States Senate. Second reason why I'm running has to do with fiscal responsibility. I mentioned our debt a minute ago. It's inexcusable that we have that kind of debt. $40,000 a head, $13 trillion overall. It gets worse from there because that's just the acknowledged debt. The off-the-books debt, the unfunded entitlement liability, is an estimated anywhere from $50 to $100 trillion, meaning that each one of us has a debt it's at least $250,000, maybe as much as a half or $750,000, depending on how you estimate it and how you break it down. They haven't been spending in a manner that's responsible or sustainable. They haven't been passing balanced budgets, and that has to change, and it has to change now. They have to start balancing their budget. Again, Senator Bennett, while a good man, has not been vigilant in this area. He's voted 9 consecutive times. He was elected in 1993, voted, first couple times the debt ceiling issue came up, he voted against raising the national debt ceiling. He then voted 9 consecutive times to raise the national debt ceiling, bringing us a long way from where we were in 1993 when he took office, where we had just over $4 trillion in debt. Still a lot of money, but more manageable than what we have today. Brought us a lot closer to where we are today, a lot closer to the $13 trillion level where we have today. 9 consecutive times. They've only had 12 or 13 votes to do that. And he voted for 9 of them. 9 in a row. I will never vote for a budget that is not balanced in the absence of a constitutionally legitimate declared war. And even then, I would hope that we wouldn't do so in the absence of a 3/4 supermajority of Congress. But we can't continue to spend the way that we've been spending. It is unsustainable. I wish that it were not necessary to take fairly extreme measures in order to remedy this. I personally don't see any way around it other than to amend the Constitution, not through a constitutional convention, but through the traditional method of 2/3 of both houses of Congress proposing it, and then 3/4 of the states ratifying it, without a constitutional convention, to require a balanced budget, and to prohibit Congress from spending more than it takes in any given year, without a 3/4 supermajority, and also simultaneously prohibiting Congress from spending ever more than 20% of gross domestic product in a particular year. This is the only way we can ensure that they won't continue to mortgage the future of our children and our grandchildren and those who come after them. Unfortunately, surprisingly, Senator Bennett has openly opposed the balanced budget amendment, saying that if we had that, Democrats would just use it as an excuse to raise taxes. So we're going to blame it on the Democrats now. We're going to blame it on the Democrats when we as Republicans held the majority of both houses of Congress for the better part of the 12-year period between 1994 and 2006. And yet what happened to the national debt during that period? Did it go away? It went up. It went up a lot. It went up 9 consecutive times, the national debt did, with Senator Bennett's vote. Don't tell me it's just about the Democrats. More to the point, if Democrats couldn't resist the impulse to expand government, even though they were going to have to raise taxes each time, if they did do that, and they did raise taxes, they would not be in office very long because we would elect them out of office. The American people wouldn't stand for it. But instead, when we allow them to spend without accountability that comes along with increased spending, because we're just transferring to future generations, not only are we essentially taxing future unborn generations without their representation, without their consent, we're also completely eliminating accountability for those who are engaging in this profligate spending. We're making it possible for them to avoid any kind of political or financial accountability for this until long after they're dead and gone. So, in seeking public office in the state of our union that has the lowest median age of any state in the union, which means that we will bear a disproportionate share of that debt as our future generations pay it off in the future, I feel I have a special obligation to our state not to postpone the spending patterns, the irresponsible spending patterns that have enabled, that have facilitated our inevitable, inexorable growth, the expansion of our federal government to a point that's unsustainable. That sort of thing happens. We inch bit by bit by bit towards socialism, towards Marxism, towards statism, totalitarianism, when we do it on the backs of those who are not here to vote it out. And that has to stop. That's the second reason why I'm running. The third and final reason why I'm running has to do with the natural outgrowth of those first two principles, which is when we see a problem, we have to stop thinking of that problem in terms of it being something that Congress needs to fix by a new government program or necessarily even